There's a bunch of injuries that the Commanders are dealing with. Some of them are more serious than others. Some of them are just painful things guys are playing through. But of the three key players who have missed time recently, so I'm going to put on that list corner Marshon Lattimore, running back Brian Robinson, and right tackle Andrew Wylie. Who would be the most important of the three to have available and ready to go play and play well against the Eagles?
Lattimore is critically important. That is a pretty easy and obvious answer. But let me make the case for Andrew Wylie. I think you got away with it on Sunday. I think you got away with having backups, not having Cornelius Lucas, having Trent Scott in there. I think you got away for a short amount of time. If a team has time to game plan, a time to make some adjustments, you're going to see a flood and the best possible pressure coming on that side. To me, their run game suffered a little bit because not having Wylie. I think in terms of some of the screens haven't really clicked here of late as guys have been banged up on the offensive line. I think Wylie is underrated at this point, which again is so night and day from where we started last year. He and Quan Martin, both left over from the Rivera era, have actually turned into pretty integral players for this offense and defense respectively. But I think Wylie is critically important to protecting Jaden Daniels and kind of keeping this going of him not being in harm's way an awful lot, which you haven't had those QB sack return fumbles, those passes knocked down or tipped up in the air for interceptions. You saw that a couple times against Pittsburgh. You are due for some bad luck there, and I think Wylie can help prevent that.
The one thing about Wylie missing this game potentially would be that the Eagles' pass rush has not been very good. We talked to Jay
It's been
Gruden.
a disappointment, honestly, yeah.
Gruden was on the show yesterday, and he basically said Josh Sweat is just okay, which he's had some huge games against Washington in the past. But this is a guy who, other than 1 year when he had the monster 2022, he's never had more than 7.5 sacks. He does have 5 already this year. Had a 2-sack game a couple weeks ago against Jacksonville. But he's not TJ Watt, who you just had to deal with. I worry some, though, about would they go into that game feeling like Trent Scott could just deal with him and they don't chip as much. They don't keep a tight end in as much. Like when you're dealing with TJ Watt, you know what you have to do. I have to help this guy or else TJ Watt will wreck the game. Is it possible that they say with Josh Sweat, well, let's just let him rush and we won't have as big a problem? I mean, if it's him against Coleman or him against Wylie, I could see him making a play or two. I just don't think he could take over the game. And the other guy's Bryce Huff. I can't believe how ineffective he's been. And I haven't watched every one of their games. I'll be frank in saying I'm just looking at the numbers and kind of hunting box scores. I wanted Washington to sign Bryce Huff big time. I was a huge proponent because of all of the metrics on him as a pass rusher with the Jets last year. Not just the 10 sacks, but how often he won one-on-one, 20-plus hits on the quarterback. He has had a brutal first season in Philly. 9 games. He's now not even starting every one of their games. 2.5 sacks and just 4 hits on the quarterback.
Crazy.
He's done basically nothing.
Remember, they're a year removed from setting a modern NFL record for sacks. Like they were the greatest pass rush team in league history just 2 seasons ago.
The Super Bowl 2 years ago.
Yeah, and then they fell off
3 coordinators ago.
I know, isn't that nuts? And they fell off a little bit to a degree last year, back to the pack with everyone else. And now this year they're relatively anemic in that regard. I mean, a lot of guys have 1.5 or 2 here and there. It's a product of blitzing and mixing and matching and some health related things, but there's not a consistent great pass rush there. I'm with you.
So my answer is Marshon Lattimore. We talked about Lattimore the day he got acquired, if you remember, needing to be ready for the Philly game. That was really the hope. I don't know how much you take out of the Dallas performance because they basically called off the Dogs pretty early on. That game was 28-6 in the third quarter. But A.J. Brown went 5 for 109. Devonta Smith had just 2 for 14. But there have been games recently where they've gotten both of those guys involved pretty extensively. We saw St. Juste have his struggles again against Pittsburgh in man coverage. He's not alone, by the way, that they got beat. Otherwise, other corners were getting beat by lesser receivers than just George Pickens. This is a bad matchup on paper. A bad matchup for Washington if they don't have Marshon Lattimore. Because they can roll 3+ receivers at you in 11 personnel. They can split out tight ends. They've got size. They've got a physical wideout that you don't have anyone who can cover him in A.J. Brown. They've got the shifty, smaller guy that gives them fits in Devonta Smith. It's just not a good look personnel-wise if Lattimore doesn't go. So I'm going to say he's my most important guy.
It makes a lot of sense. And that, to me, is probably the obvious answer, right? Where now they haven't had him and you don't know what it looks like with him. We're just hoping and anticipating. It's the only reason I'm giving the nod to Wylie here. But on paper, yeah, you can't cover. A.J. Brown has had feasts against Washington in recent years, and he loves the idea of them. Yep, go ahead, travel with me, Benjamin St. Juste. You can watch my tuchus as I cross the goal line for the millionth time while I burn you 6 ways from Sunday. So on paper, that makes the most sense, and it's obvious. Philadelphia's offense is humming right now. They've got answers. Any counter you have, they've got a counter to your counter, whether it's Jalen Hurts running, Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. Goddard, when he's healthy, is obviously still a factor. Then we know the bookend receivers. So Lattimore makes a lot of sense. It in theory is going to expand things on defense. Just make it easy to roll coverages, to play different ways, to be more aggressive in the box, to stop the run, presumably. Him being there and playing is going to unlock a lot of things. In theory, we just haven't seen it yet.
The only guy we haven't mentioned then, if you're going Wylie and I'm going Lattimore, is Brian Robinson. B-Rob, who did practice today. We don't have a lot of access and information, but we were told he was going to be back on the practice field. That's a good sign. I actually thought he was going to play as of Sunday, when after the game, Dan Quinn on Andrew Wylie was extremely non-committal, didn't have a lot to add or say. Same, frankly, on Marshon Lattimore. But on Brian Robinson, he said at one point, we think or hope he turned a corner. That's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay, that's a telling. That's pretty good. So part of him not playing against the Steelers may have been to make sure he's ready for this Eagles game. And right now I would think he would play, although I would have thought that this past week too.
Yeah, same here.
Because of who they have, though, at the position, I'm less desperate to get him back. I know that you miss him. I think they missed him against Baltimore. They almost won the game. They missed him against Pittsburgh. They almost won the game. Maybe you win that Steelers game if you have him. Maybe you have a better chance against the Ravens if you have him. Having your good players is helpful, sure. But Austin Eckler had 2 touchdowns in this game. Jeremy McNichols had a touchdown. We've seen 2 weeks ago Chris Rodriguez play very well. I just don't feel like they're ever weak at that position. They could do things better, and having B-Rob would help them. But I never really feel like when they take the field with this running back group that they don't have enough personnel there to win a game.
Yeah, the advantage to having Brian Robinson is it lets Eckler go back to the Eckler role, right? Instead of Eckler on first down, where somebody's got a thump. It's I love early passings to running backs early down, little pitches wide or arrow routes or choice routes or keeping them in pass pro. But sometimes you're going to run the football on early downs when everybody's stacked up because you either got to do it or to set something up or, it's just part of the game, right? So when Eckler has to do that, you're almost negating third down back Austin Eckler, right? So I want him to be able to return to that role. So maybe you have early down McNichols or early down Chris Rodriguez or something like that to kind of mix and match, and you got to go against types sometimes, but it's all that live chess match. But in theory, when you have Brian Robinson as he is here to barrel your butt over, period, end of story, and Eckler can do a little bit of everything, then everybody's in their allotted role. Eckler doesn't get enough credit for how good he is in terms of short yardage, in terms of wiggling forward, in terms of taking on contact. He's not getting trucked and blown back. I mean, he's always finishing 4-2. I mean, you look at the nose for the goal line. He's one of the best touchdown scoring backs in recent league history, simply because of how good he is at that. The body control, the lean, low center of gravity, etc. But you take him out of his pass catching, pass pro dynamic role and put him in the thumper role, everyone gets a little bit worse.
I just now got a notification from Twitter that my poll from yesterday just hit 24 hours, so I guess it closes, and that the results are now back in, so we have our definitive answer.
Results are in.
Remember yesterday we polled, did you find Washington's loss to the Steelers to be encouraging or discouraging? 57% of people were encouraged, and 43% were discouraged, which is actually pretty close.
Yeah.
Tells you that a lot of people have already recalibrated to the present to say, this is a good team. We need to start thinking about them trying to win something meaningful this year. And then a lot of people are still in the house money season where they go, I'm not so sure. They played hard. They almost beat the Steelers. They're 7-3. They're surpassing all expectations. They've got their quarterback of the future. Everybody seems to want to play for this head coach who's going to be around and might be the answer here for a long time. I can't get that upset about the loss. That's something worth talking about in the 5 o'clock hour. Like, how should we be viewing the rest of this season now? Through what lens should we look at their progress?